Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I'm Dr. Love, Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, tonight we are celebrating Valentine's Day with each other, which is kind of odd, with a new horror film. Maybe not. Maybe a new horror romantic comedy. It's a lot of genre stuffed into one film called Hard Eyes.
Yes, Damon. Hard Eyes, released in February of 2025, starring the likes of Jordana Brewster as Detective Shaw, Devon Sawa, the great Devon Sawa, as Detective Hobbs, Mason Gooding as Jay, and Olivia Holt as Allie. Written, I should say, by Philip Murphy, Christopher Landon, Michael Kennedy, and directed by a favorite of this podcast, Mr. Josh Rubin. Hello, Josh Rubin. By the way, also second unit director on this, a very talented Lauren Sick, who is his wife. She's an incredible commercial director who I've actually been following for a long time too. And they got to do a husband and wife thing on this, and she helped out with second unit work on this. Damon, we are talking the most romantic slasher that I can think of in recent memory, Hard Eyes.
And we are, well, at least I am. I've been a devout Josh Rubin fan for a lot of years, going back to Scare Me. I know that wasn't necessarily your bag, but I loved Scare Me. That was one of my favorite films that year it came out.
But I knew it was a good movie. I think that was what I took away from it. I was like, I don't like it, but I think this is very well done.
And then we loved Werewolves Within. That was just a brilliant, hilarious, great movie. We really, really enjoyed that. And this is his first foray into like a big studio film. And I gotta say, like, I've seen some mixed reviews on this one online, a couple things here and there, but listen, it's well documented when you come to our podcast. My favorite genre is slashers. I love a slasher film. I grew up on slasher films. But I am also kind of harshly judgmental of slasher films, because if you don't get it right, you can get it really wrong. And I think of a film that we reviewed 2 years ago or last year, when it came out, it was 2 years ago, called Founders Day. And Founders Day had an interesting enough premise, but the problem with Founders Day, and you can go back and find that episode, was they just overcomplicated it way too much. Like they tried to like drill this plot into just this weird different directions, and it just got convoluted and not great, and it just wasn't a great movie. Hard Eyes is like the exact opposite. They just know what they're going for. It is a funny romantic comedy with a lot of brutal kills and a very simple plot. We're gonna have a spoiler section, but I'll be honest, you don't really need a non-spoiler because the premise is what the movie is, and sometimes with a slasher, that's all you really need.
Oh, please don't overcomplicate slashers. You're talking to the man who says Friday the 13th is his favorite slasher series exactly because of that. Because they get out of the way of things like plot and story and character development, and they get to the slashing. They really do. I mean, for the longest time, Jason had the highest kill count. I think Michael Myers has taken it over because of the David Gordon Green movies, but I think we're going to rescind some of those kills. Everything in Halloween Ends is null and void. Let's be honest with you. We're not even going to count that movie now. Talk about a movie that complicated its plot to the point that Michael Myers kind of disappeared from the plot, interestingly enough. Hard Eyes does not suffer these things. Josh Rubin, I think Josh Rubin is adamant about something. He has said, and I've heard him in podcasts say before, I want to have fun with my movies. I'm not taking myself serious in these movies. It's not going to be dark and dank and dour and depressing. We're going to have fun. I insist upon it. Go watch your sad bastard movies somewhere else. These are movies for fun. These are movies for a crowd. Indeed, I think he succeeds with Hard Eyes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, which, by the way, I don't know if you were referencing it or not, but nice reference with the high fidelity with the sad bastard, which is a great line by Jack Black.
I'm definitely referencing
Go on,
Another great romantic movie, by the way.
Yeah, try to cheer you up, buddy. Go on and listen to your sad bastard music. That's one of my favorite lines from that movie. Listen, Josh Rubin knows his bag, and he knows what he's doing, and this is a perfect example of that. I was actually, a little surprised because, everything he's done up to this point, he's also had a hand in writing, and this was one he just directed. it shows you he can do both, because this is a well-directed film. And Christopher Landon, as I mentioned in the intro, he did Happy Death Day, he did Freaky, which are both really fun, enjoyable horror films. And he was going to do Scream 7, of course, before disaster struck. He's a really talented guy as well. So again, like I kind of jokingly called it like horror super friends. Like, these are all accomplished filmmakers in their own rights. You got Christopher Landon, who's actually a really good director in his own right, writing the script,
Yeah.
and then you got Josh Rubin, who is also a talented screenwriter, directing. So yeah, it all worked out for the best. And as I said, this movie this movie is still a little different, because while, like, when you tell, like, he mentioned repeatedly, when I read interviews with Josh Rubin, repeatedly mentioned Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. He repeatedly mentioned that particular installment of the Friday the 13th series. As soon as he said that, I was like, if Patrick doesn't like this movie, I'm going to be really bummed, because he knew what he was going for. And this movie, while it is a slasher, and it is very much a classic slasher, one thing I hate about some really bad slashers or bad horror films of the 80s is when they try to take themselves too seriously and it's just comically bad, right?
Yeah.
But then when you watch some of the Friday the 13th movies, like the one, I think it's Part 4, where Crispin Glover is dancing, which is one of the most iconic, they know what they're doing. They're making fun of it. They're not trying to be serious. Like, they're really not. Like, that's one thing, again, I know Friday the 13th isn't my favorite series, but I appreciate the simplicity of a lot of those films. That in particular, that scene with Crispin Glover cracks me up every single time. They knew it was going to be dumb and funny. They weren't trying to make it serious. That's where Hard Eyes succeeds, where so many other films fail in this genre, is they're not taking themselves too seriously. They're just having fun. And the comedy, I heard a couple of reviews say the comedy is almost too much. And I was like, you know what? They're creating their own subgenre of slasher. This is a romantic comedy slasher film. And that is something I can't really say I've seen before.
No, and by the way, Hard Eyes is not the first romantic comedy we've had, because we talked about Your Monster last year on Halloween of all holidays, which was 100% a romantic comedy, but it was not a slasher. It was like a monster movie kind of. This is a slasher, like a dyed-in-the-wool slasher, and I got to tell you, like, I love this combination, because I think slashers can suffer from either taking themselves too seriously or just simply like not being able to balance, like, if they're going to be funny, which there's a couple of funny slashers out there. They're going to be funny, but are the kills going to be interesting? Is it really going to is the pace going to keep going? Josh Rubin said, "Okay, I'm making a romantic comedy that happens to have a slasher going on in it, like it's the template is a slasher, but this is a romantic comedy. So the plot is indeed about this girl Allie, who works at an ad agency, and let's just say things aren't going well. She's made a very ill-timed campaign for her agency that is not working out too well. I don't want to spoil too much of that, because I think not only do I not want to spoil like the plot of the movie, I don't want to spoil a lot of the comedy either. I hate when podcasts like tell you all the funny stuff right out front. It's like, let people go and see the funny and let them enjoy the funny. It's less funny if you know the funny's coming. So there's a lot of funniness about just kind of her day-to-day life. And of course, any romantic comedy, she's a bit unlucky in love currently. And a man swoops into her life, and he's tall, dark, and handsome. And, they're butting heads at first, of course, and for very funny reasons, for very specific reasons. And they just happen to be in the crosshairs of Heart Eyes, the Heart Eyes killer. And Damon, it just gets going from there. What can I say? They put it in first gear, they step on the gas, and they get off the line super fast, and you're just in this romantic comedy that has all the romantic comedy beats, including the funny, including the heartbreak moments, including the arguments, including all of the little like opposites attract moments, and will they, won't they moments, and the ex-lover getting involved, like all of that, with just like every few minutes a great kill. Is there an issue here? What else can we do for you? We are serving you up exactly what you're looking for.
And one little plot detail I want to mention, which by the way does not ruin anything. I promise you. You mentioned that they both work at a they're both ad executives, but she is an ad executive at a jewelry company,
Right.
and the jewelry company that she works for, she just ran a really ill advised really ill advised campaign that did not work out too well, and so her boss, and like a fit of fury to get this fixed, calls in a fixer, a genius young fixer, to come in and like help fix this problem. And that's where we meet Jay, who is Mason Gooding's character. Now, you're an ad executive working at a company and you put your heart and soul into a campaign and your boss just said it sucks. I'm going to bring in this guy to fix it. You've just set up the perfect way for these two to immediately butt heads because they're not supposed to get along. You know, he's supposed to come in and fix the problem of something you did, and no one wants that. Nobody in your job wants that. Like, I'm a writer, I have editors, but you don't want someone to come in and say your story was pretty good, but we're going to come and have this guy fix it for you. That's just like watch my head explode. Or if you film something and they're like, we're going to hire an editor come in and fix what you filmed.
Yeah. It's always nice to hear.
Yeah, you might see Patrick's head explode. So imagine that. That's the scenario here. And so immediately they're putting these two at odds. They're not meant to be like best of friends or like immediately like sexually charged, but because they're both young, good-looking people, there is a unbelievable attraction you can't just deny or ignore. But like anything else, when you butt heads with somebody, no matter how attracted you are at them, you're like, yeah, I don't like that person. And so they kind of butt heads in that way, and that really sets up the story as far as these two, kind of not getting along, but being forced to work together because they have to fix this campaign. And it all takes place on Valentine's Day. And that is the day for the past few years where this HEK, this heart eyes killer, has just rubbed out a bunch of couples in different cities. This all isn't happening in one city. I think they did one in Boston. I want to say, was it New York or some other place? And now they're in Seattle, I think, in the third year. And yeah, that's it. Like, that's it. Like, the Hard Eyes Killer targets couples. If you are a couple on Valentine's Day, you have a chance of becoming a target of the Hard Eyes Killer. That's it. That's the plot. And it's fun. It's simple. They're not trying to overcomplicate it. And then in the middle of all this, you get some really fun, witty dialogue, some truly hilarious moments. Like, I've seen some people complain like it's almost too funny. I'm like, that's kind of the point. Like, this is a romantic comedy. Yeah, it is a comedy. Like I know when we did Your Monster last year, we talked about our favorite romantic comedies, and I brought up like one of mine is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. That movie is hilarious. Now, it is technically a romantic comedy. It is. Like, it's about, a guy who gets broken up with his girlfriend, and he tries to go to Hawaii to, repair his soul, so to speak, and he meets another girl, and then his ex-girlfriend also happens to be there with her new boyfriend. It's a mess. So it is a romance, but it is also freaking hilarious. Like, it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Now just take that scenario and inject a Jason Voorhees, and boom, that's all you really need. And so this is, again, it's very simplistic. It's not overcomplicated, but it is really funny. I mean, it is legitimately laugh out loud funny, but there are some pretty brutal kills, some great chase sequences. Again, this is, I know I don't want to keep, I know, so it sounds like I'm really taking a hammer to poor Founders Day, but this is a movie this is a movie that just knows what it is, and it's not trying to be more than what it is. When I say, like, I really liked it, like, I think about probably one of my all-time favorite slashers is Scream, the original Scream. That was such a genius, original concept that we had never really seen before. It deconstructed horror films in the movie, and it also gave you a great mystery and things you didn't see coming. And it was, again, still a classic slasher formula, but they injected so many new little wrinkles that you had never really seen before in a slasher. That movie was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, the problem is that Scream created a sort of a blueprint where a lot of people followed that and tried to do the same thing. Mostly unsuccessfully, many times over, where there's a lot of bad copycats out there trying to do Scream. Hard Eyes gets down to the nitty gritty. It's a couple that aren't really a couple, and they're getting stalked by a killer. That's it. That's all you need.
What else do you need? Now, really quick, I want to touch on one other little element of this movie, and that is the slasher element, without getting into um, anything other than the iconography. The Heart Eyes Killer. I love this design. Now, I'm not spoiling anything because they show the Heart Eyes Killer in the trailer. And by the way, we talked about trailers last week and how they gave way too much away. Hard Eyes Killer trailer does not suffer these issues. It just gives you like it's going to be funny, there's going to be romance, and there's going to be a killer. That killer's design is so cool. Some people might not like it because it's very designed, but wisely they kept it simple. All right, so the ghost face silhouette, easy to understand and recognize when you see that ghost face mask. You understand what you're getting into. You see the cloak. You could even see, even if you just saw an outline of it in black, you'd be like, "Oh, that's Ghostface." Same thing with Jason. Same thing with Freddy. He's got his hat and his glove. You know who he is. Michael Myers, pretty easy to tell. You know, he's his size and his mask, and you're good. You know what you're doing. Hard Eyes Killer. I love the idea behind this mask, that it was going to be these two heart eyes, that it's going to be this killer who attacks people who are in love. I love that. And to me, Damon, I thought right away, this to me is good, easy, digestible iconography that I can get behind, because and we'll talk later down the line about sequels and all that stuff. But it's like it was a cool look that sort of invokes all of those things. By the way, Josh Rubin, huge Darkman fan. Tell me there's not a little bit of Darkman influence in that coat, in the coat, and in the mask looks a little bit like Darkman's like wrapped up head. I don't see that, Josh, and good on you for like putting a little bit of it in there. But to me, I think the Hard Eyes Killer looks great. I love that the eyes glow. I love that the preferred weapon is just a big ass fucking knife. But of course, the Hard Eyes Killer gets creative and uses things around them to kill people. What say you, Damon Martin, about this, the iconography around a slasher, which is a critical part of a good slasher?
The design of the mask and this particular killer is one of my favorite parts of this movie. It looks great. They're going to make masks like this for Halloween next year. They are going to make action figures with this particular character because it is great. It's got a trench coat and it's got a lot of really cool weapons. He carries they carry a crossbow. They have like little protractable arrows that are with like little hearts on the end. I mean, come on!
Like
It's
little
like
Cupid arrows.
yeah, little Cupid arrows. It's great, and yeah, and the killer's brutal. Like this is not and this is not a killer who's just like hanging out and stabbing you one time. This is a killer who's going to get pretty brutal. But the killer carries a knife, and then it carries a giant machete. It's got a full full on arsenal it carries around on its belt and in its trench coat. And then the mask is great. I love the simplicity of the mask. It looks like just a kind of like a leather mask almost with like a creepy smile on it, and then the heart eyes that light up. And it's not too much, but it's easily identifiable. Now it's funny. I mentioned earlier that Josh Rubin loves that Friday the 13th movie. At one point, when they were designing the different masks, trying to come up with a look, at one point he actually tried to do a hockey mask, and he was like, "Yeah, it just looks too much like Jason." He's like, "I tried. I wanted to pay homage to like Friday the 13th, but he's like, it just looked too much like it, so I couldn't do it." But I love that he like even thought of that. He's like, "Let me just try to inject this little bit of my favorite movie in there." But yeah, it is iconic, and another movie, I mentioned one that we said tried too hard. One that didn't, and I know that like it wasn't your favorite movie of the year, but you enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it. And again, it's not a movie that I think is like amazing, and it was one of my top 5 of the year. But a movie like Thanksgiving, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving,
Right?
simple enough plot, didn't overcomplicate it. It gave you a little bit more. I think there was a little bit more story injected in there, but not to the point of Founders Day where they were just going way off the rails with that one. Thanksgiving was simple enough plot. They gave you kind of an iconic looking slasher with the John Carver mask, and then some truly brutal kills. I think Thanksgiving was more brutal than Hard Eyes. But that's what I liked about Thanksgiving. It didn't overcomplicate it. It was just a fun slasher. Gave you some, and that one, again, playing into the whole teen drama of it all was very much at the heart of that movie. It knew what it was going for, and it didn't try to overcomplicate it. And Hard Eyes is very much that. this kind of goes back to some of my favorite classic slashers of the 80s. Movies like My Bloody Valentine, which I know is another movie that takes place around the same time of year. You know, they give you a plot and they give you a couple little, the MacGuffin of who, what is the object or what is the person that you're really supposed to be focused on. And then just some cool, really brutal slashings, brutal killings. And that's what it's. I'm not saying you can't make a quote unquote more intelligent slasher. I just mentioned Scream is that. But if you don't have the end, if you don't have the right story, don't do it. Is I guess my point. Like, and Hard Eyes, like when it was over, I sat in the theater. By the way, did you stay for the post credit scene? There is a post credit scene. Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, there is a little post credit scene. So stick around and you'll get a little Marvel moment in there. When it was over, I just sat there and I was like, that was fun. That was fun. I had a good time. I laughed. There were some brutal kills. There were some funny moments. There was some great acting. I mean, listen, Olivia Holt, who we've reviewed before, she was in Totally Killer last year. We reviewed that movie. She was in that. She also did, she was she played the mom from the 80s, like when her daughter went back.
Oh, that's right. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know Olivia Holt.
Yeah.
I love Totally Killer.
Yeah, she was also in a TV show. God, I'm going to have to look it up now. She was in a TV show that was on the Freeform, I think is what it was called. It was a TV show called, let me see if I can find it real quick here, Cruel Summer. It was an anthology. It only ran for 2 seasons. She was in the first season. The second season was the same setup. Basically, it's a story that was told in like 3 different time periods. So like you get something from like one part of the year, the second. So you kind of get the whole story wouldn't come together till the very end of the show. I loved it. I thought it was like an incredibly well-crafted show. It bummed me out it got canceled because both seasons were really good. But Olivia Holt was in the first season. That's where I had first seen her. She was great in this. And again, when you get an actor like that. And then Mason Gooding, who, of course, we know very well from the Scream franchise, but he's been in other things. He was in Y2K, which we reviewed and both loved last year. And then you add in Devon Sawa, the legend, who is a friend of mine, just to put it out in Front Street, so it's not like some weird disclosure thing. I'm friends with Devon. I've known Devon for a lot of years. He was a fan of my work in MMA, and I've been a fan of his work in acting for a lot of years. Anytime I can see my boy Devon Sawa on screen, I'm going to get excited. And then Jordana Brewster, who we all know from the Fast and the Furious movies, but she is actually a pretty talented actor. We, of course, know her from Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, which was one of our more favorite of the Texas Chainsaw series, because that's not a great series, but that movie with her was actually one of the best ones. The cast is great. The execution is great. It's just,
by the way, before you leave the cast, I'm going to tell you, Michaela Watkins, a great comedic actor who, if you loved Werewolves Within, she was sort of the conservative neighbor who was very fucking funny in that movie. She has a smaller role in this too, but I just wanted to bring her out because it's like, if you loved her in Werewolves Within, she's in this as well in a totally different role, but just equally funny. It's just a great rounded out cast.
And I want to say one last thing here. We've mentioned this on the show before, and we're 280 some episodes in, so I don't remember where along the lines I've mentioned this. But we talked about some actors say that they can't do horror or they can't do comedy. There's 2 things that are really, some actors will just flat out say horror and comedy are hard to do. One, comedy is all about timing. And some actors will flat out tell you, I just don't have the timing to pull off comedy. Horror, because you have to react to things, they're just like, I don't have that in me. And you know what? Now, I'm talking like really talented actors have said this, like not like Oscar nominated level actors, like, I just can't pull it off, so I don't do it. And I appreciate the honesty. This movie's both. You have to have the comedic timing and the horror. Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding as the leads, and again, everyone is good in this movie, but those 2 as the leads, they really do pull it off and do it off well, because again, these are 2 genres combined that can be difficult.
Well, let's get into it, Damon, because we can talk about that.
Absolutely. So, if you haven't seen Hard Eyes, it is in theaters right now. If you can't tell, Patrick and I really enjoyed this film. It's fun.
Please see it in theaters.
It's fun. Yeah, it's a really enjoyable time. And like I said, don't go in thinking it's more than what it is. It's not, but that's a good thing. Go see Hard Eyes.
Yeah, sorry, Damon. I do want to say one thing about go see Hard Eyes. Why I'm saying go see it in the theater, not just because Damon and I champion the theater experience. On a very serious note, I mentioned earlier that Josh Rubin and Lauren Sick, husband and wife directing team, they lost their home that they had not even moved into yet in Altadena in the Los Angeles fires. They are certainly not out there with their hands out begging or anything like that. But they are still independent filmmakers. They are still people who work jobs to jobs and work very hard at what they do every single day. You supporting this in the theaters supports them. It really does. Like you go, oh, what can I do? What can I do to help these people out? You can make this like number two, number three at the box office this weekend, and you could make their day. You really could. Get out there and go see it and support really genuinely good and sweet people who have always been very kind to me. I had a discussion with Josh just this afternoon. He's just a very sweet, nice, and approachable and open person. Lauren is very much the same way. And I think they did an incredible job. I think they put together a movie that's wonderful for theaters. And if you want to do a little something to help some people out, you can go see this movie. That's a good deal for all of us, right? Oh, I get to go see a movie in the theater, and it maybe helps them on the back end a little bit because their movie has some success.
And thank you for mentioning that. I'm so glad you did because I actually had that in the back of my mind because I'd read an interview with Josh and he talked about how cathartic it was, like to help him deal with the loss of their house. They were in post and dealing with the promotion of this movie, and it really helped him kind of deal with the trauma of losing their home. It was like, getting into this movie. He's like, it really did help just having this movie at the same time to like kind of get their minds off of things. I don't know them. I know you do know them a little bit. I don't, but you can just go back and listen to our episodes where we review their movies, and I loved both. I mean, Josh Rubin, I've said, is one of my favorite up and coming filmmakers. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for mentioning that because I actually did want to bring that up and I'd forgotten. So thank you. So yeah, as you said, that's not why we're saying it, but as an added bonus, plump down your money, see it in the theater, and you're going to be supporting some really good people who, consequently are, going through it kind of right now, as a lot of people in that area are, of course.
Yeah.
With that being said, Patrick, let's get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Hard Eyes, if you can't tell, Patrick and I really enjoyed this film, so go check it out in theaters. It's available right now. I would recommend it. You would recommend it. As we all said, it is a theater-going experience. Regardless, I just love seeing a good slasher in a theater regardless, and this is exactly that. So again, if you haven't seen it, be forewarned, we're now getting into spoilers. Patrick, where do you want to get into with the spoiler aspect of this movie? Are we talking about the funny? Are we talking about the ending? Where do we want to go with this?
Honestly, I think like even if we got into categories, I think because this is a very simple and straightforward movie. This is the opposite of Founders Day, where we have to unpack the motives of the killer. The motives of the killer in this movie, I'll say this right now, they are just to kill romantic couples on Valentine's Day. That's what they're into. Now you're going, who's they? Who are they? Honestly, I will say it's sort of inconsequential when you find out who they are. I believe that's a good thing. I think we are too used to going, what did it all mean? It had to have a deeper meaning. What you learn is, yes, there are multiple killers. Okay, that's the biggest spoiler I'm going to bother giving you. There are multiple killers. Their motives were still very simple. They're like, we like killing people who look like they're in love. And that's it. And so you targeted us? Yes, but we weren't a couple. Yeah, but you looked super romantic. So when we saw you guys kissing, we were sure. Like, you know what I mean? And that's part of the romantic comedy plot, which is Allie is still kind of burnt about her last boyfriend. He's now moved on. He's with someone else, and she's on social media all the time, seeing him and her having a wonderful life together, and she's sort of unlucky in love. And then when Mason Gooding's character comes into the picture, they bump into her ex going into a restaurant that they're leaving, that they just finished arguing at because they're not getting along because he's trying to take her job. And when she sees her ex, she just instinctually kisses him. So that way her ex sees that and is jealous that she's kissing this handsome guy. And that turned Hard Eye's target towards them, like just randomly. It's just a random act of violence. Great slasher situation there. I loved that. I loved that it didn't try to get in the weeds and make everything make sense. And there are multiple killers. I won't even tell you how many, but I will tell you one hilarious moment that I loved. they unmask their first of the multiple killers, and they both look at you and go, "Who is that?" And they go, I don't know who that is. Like I personally love that because I think, and I think you agree with this, Damon. A lot of slashers are just hell bent on trying to emulate what Scream did, which is make the killer so relevant to the main characters, like so intrinsically tied to those characters that when that reveal happens, you're like, oh my God, it was so and so all along. Or and you know, and by the way, I was doing that in during the movie. I noticed like a scar on his neck on oh God, why am I forgetting his name right now? What's the name of the character? Jay.
Jay, yeah, Jay.
Yeah, I saw a scar on Jay's neck, and they made a point to show it. And I realized that's Josh Rubin going, every little detail in this movie is going to matter. He's going to turn, you're going to see a scar. They're not going to make a big deal of it. They don't do a close up or an insert on it. You just see it. And you go, huh, I wonder if that's going to lead to anything. And then for a while, you do wonder if he's one of these hard eyes killers. But he's not. And he had no grand design on Allie or anything like that. It was just like, no, randomly, as random as hell, these people who have a fetish for killing lovers train their eyes on our particular main characters in that were in their own romantic comedy. I love that.
Well, and when you talk about like the simplicity of the reason for the killers, yeah, you mentioned right there, and you kind of throw away it's true. It's a fetish for them. They get off on it. That's their thing. Like they get off on killing couples. And it's not just like we enjoy killing. They're kind of like this is like gets us like horny and sexy. That's hilarious. Like that's all they're into. And you mentioned the one killer unmasks himself, and they're like, huh? We're going to talk about our favorite comedy in this movie, but I'm gonna ruin it a little bit by talking about this one moment because earlier in the film, Allie goes to the police station to like basically give like they arrest Jay at one point. They think he's the hard eyes killer because you know they're starting to put two and two together and they realize, hey, you're kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe you're the guy, and so they arrest Jay and they're questioning Jay and Allie, Olivia Holt's character, comes in and says, listen, he was with me. He couldn't have been the hard eyes killer. Of course, right. You know, we later learned there are multiple killers. But she's like, he couldn't have been the killer. He's with me. And so she's talking to the police station. And while she's talking to the desk sergeant, this guy pops out and he's like, hey, your computer's fixed. You're all good. It's the IT guy. And he's like, oh, you're all good. And he kind of pops out. He sees this gorgeous woman in Olivia Holt. And he's like, hey. And he's like, hey, how you doing? And like they start chit-chatting a little bit. And like a minute into this conversation, he's like, so I'm just going to shoot my shot. Would you like to have coffee sometime? She's like, yeah, the guy I'm with was just accused of murder, and I'm just not really in a place for that, so I'm going to pass. He's like, hey, can't blame a guy for trying.
Yeah.
And he kind of walks away. When the big reveal happens, the mask comes off. It's the IT guy. And he takes his mask off in like dramatic fashion, like, ha, remember me? And Olivia Holt, Allie's like, who? And he's like, me. And she's like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, the IT guy, I hit on you like 2 hours ago. She's like, I have no memory. You can just see the disappointment wash over his face. Like he thought it was gonna be like this big aha moment. Like, ooh, remember when I hit on you in the police station? She's just like, who? Who are you? I died. I was like, that is so perfect because we spend so many of these movies trying to do the screamification where they're like, ooh, it's, and again, Scream did it perfectly. The problem is you can't just keep duplicating that. You better not try.
Even Scream can't keep duplicating it. They're having trouble duplicating it.
Yeah. And like the big reveal, you know, like I said, like I can still get into the big reveal as long as you do it in a way that makes sense. Like you don't just try to flip things around and have false deaths and all this other craziness just trying to keep us off track. This was the best one because he's like, aha, it's me. And she's like, who the fuck are you? It's awesome.
It was so good. And it, you know, like, and I liked, look, it's all about kind of Josh Rubin's intentions, right? His intentions were to kind of lay lots of little groundwork. But what I love, and I love this about movies, and this is why I think Hard Eyes is probably going to stay pretty on my radar, I think, for a lot of the year because of what Josh Rubin did, which is every little detail in this movie matters. Every little detail matters. Every little interaction matters. It's just what it ultimately pays off to is still random. It's still random. But everything that happened ahead of it will matter to it. And I love that. I love that that attention to detail in this movie.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, let's get into some categories. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week here, Patrick, with best performance. So when it comes to Hard Eyes, which again, I know I say this a lot, people probably get sick of me saying this, but I'm going to say it. This entire cast was well acted. This was not like there's not a weak link here. I thought they all did great. But Patrick, who did you have for your best performance?
My best performance went to someone that I thought I had no idea who they were. It turns out that they were one of my favorite characters from Totally Killer, Olivia Holt, who plays Allie, our lead. What's so important about a great romantic comedy, Damon, is the woman unlucky in love. That's almost always. We had Melissa Barrera with Your Monster last year. She played it to perfection. Like a complicated, interesting woman that you do not understand why they can't have love in their life. This movie, this movie is, if you took all of the horror out of it, is very much about Allie not like just running away from good things and making bad choices. Like that's just that's what's going on in her life. So for Olivia Holt to have to play that character on top of the character who has to scream and run and fight back and all of that stuff, like this is such a multifaceted, multi-layered, multi-talented character, and it takes a multi-talented actor to do that. Olivia Holt fully succeeded.
She's one of those actors who pops on your radar and you're going to say, we're going to see a lot of her over the next few years. Like we talked about it last week with Companion and we both raved about Sophie Thatcher. I was more familiar with Sophie than you were because I watch Yellow Jackets and some other things, but there's certain actors you just pick and you're like, yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of them over the next few years. And Olivia Holt very much is that. Like I said, I had seen her in Cruel Summer. She did a great job in Totally Killer. She's done a couple other things I've seen. She's incredibly talented. And I love when people have like an attraction to horror. And if you watch interviews with her and you watch her promote this movie, you can tell she had an absolute blast doing this. And so like I hope we see more from her in this genre because she's incredibly talented and I like her a lot. So for me, Patrick, my best performance, listen, the leads in this movie are Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt. And Mason Gooding is great, by the way. He plays the kind of suave but also a little cocky, you know, he knows he's a good looking muscular dude. Like he's not hiding that fact, you know, he's not that, but so I want to give him credit. He did a great job, but I'm not giving him my best performance. My best performance I'm giving to Jordana Brewster. Now, we all know Jordana Brewster very well from the Fast and Furious movies. I am a devout fan of about 7 of those movies. They went a little off the rails in later years. I actually just rewatched Fast and Furious. I think it's like the 5th one the other night, and it's just it does again until they start going into space and shit. It's a movie that just doesn't try to overcomplicate itself. They're just like it's a fun, dumb, you know, testosterone-filled, adrenaline-filled movie. I don't need it to be more than that. And that's where I knew Jordana Brewster from, mostly, besides, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. And she was also in a show I used to love called Chuck on NBC. She was in that for a couple seasons. I really enjoyed her in that as well. But her in this movie, she plays a cop, and her partner is Devon Sawa, and together they're Hobbs and Shaw, which is hilarious because she's from the Fast and Furious, and there's a great moment where they're like, oh, this is Detective Shaw, this is Detective Hobbs, and Olivia Holt goes, so you're Hobbs and Shaw? And she kind of chuckles to herself, and they're like, we don't get the joke. The audience got the joke. My theater cracked up because they all got it at the same time, like Hobbs and Shaw. And of course, she's from Fast and Furious. But so she plays a detective, and we learned early on in this movie that Jordana Brewster's character is kind of like a little bit in on the surface, unlucky in love. Like she's literally at a murder scene, looking at her phone, going through Tinder, like, oh, should I swipe right or left on this guy? Like you can very much tell she's looking for love, looking for a man. And she's. You know, she's kind of the lead detective a little bit. Like, not to say that the Devon Sawa's character doesn't take the lead, but we just see a little bit more interaction with her. And she's the one who kind of pegs Jay as the one she suspects to be the hard eyes killer. And she has a great line. You say everything matters in this movie. She has a great line where she says, everyone has a fetish.
Yeah.
She says that to Jay in the interrogation room. the big reveal at the end of the movie after the IT guy that nobody remembers. The other reveal is that the other killer is Jordana Brewster, and she's hooked up with this guy online, and they found out they had a very similar fetish, which is killing people, killing couples. They get off on it. And so she's our other killer. And I just love the nuance of that because she does kind of play like the classic hardened detective, but she's a little, you can tell she's a little screwy, but mostly because, she's supposed to be unlucky in love is what you're thinking she is. She's the older version of Allie. Like she's supposed to be like the more mature version of Allie, like unlucky in love. In reality, she's not unlucky in love. She's actually in a throuple, we find out. Like it's her, the IT guy, and some random dude they picked up and they've been like hooking up together in this throuple. And I just loved the way she went from like the curious detective to the killer, and the shift is great, and her performance is great, and she's a little menacing. Like she's actually the menacing one of the two killers. The IT guy is mostly pissed off they don't remember who he is. Jordana Brewster's character is actually like kind of the menacing one, and so you can tell she's the one in control. But I thought she did a great job, and again, it was a different role for her.
It was different in that she had a lot of funny moments, which I'm not used to associating Jordana Brewster with funny. And so for her to be able to play in this world, because you're in a Josh Rubin movie, everything is going to be funny, everything is going to be quirky, and every character is going to have a little bend to them that's going to make them extra special and accent this movie so well. So it was cool to see her holding her own, and I really loved like her final sequence where she's the unmasked killer and she's going after everybody. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and also just before we move on, I'm just going to say hashtag family. Let's move. Let's move on to our next category and talk about the best laugh. Now, this movie, Patrick, it is freaking hilarious. Like, it is laugh out loud funny. We were talking before the show, and you had listed out a bunch of the best laugh, funniest moments in this movie, like we could pick from, and I brought up like 4 more. Because I was like, oh, well, this one and this one and this one. So, Patrick, there's a bunch. And I know we're going to talk about more than just our favorite because there were just so many. It's hard not to talk about multiple ones. But what was your favorite funny moment in Hard Eyes?
My favorite laugh in the movie, it turns out that Allie, who she actually quit her old, she was in college to become a doctor, but it turned out that she was hemophobic, which means she's afraid of blood. And they have a great little throwaway line in there, which is like, hey, it's 2024, like gay people exist. Just like I've heard that joke before, but it came out well in this. So she dropped out of that school and she became an ad exec to just get away from blood. And when you're being chased by a knife-wielding killer, a lot of blood's going to spray. But eventually, they catch up with the most random of the 3 masked killers. She gets him. He starts bleeding out and dying. And she just proceeds to projectile vomit all over his lifeless body. And they take a moment to just take a shot. Like I just love the comedy of the shot where it's just an isolated shot of Hard Eyes laying on the ground with like yellow vomit like spraying all over him. And I was cackling laughing in there because I was like, no one would do that in a slasher movie. They would take themselves too seriously to do that. And I don't know how to describe this, Damon, other than good balance, is that it was not slapstick. It was not goofy, but it was just very, very, very funny. Like there are like it wasn't like a scary movie gag. The scary movies are just like stupid. Their comedy is so dumb. Something about that moment, and I think what it is maybe Josh Rubin going, yes, this was a really serious moment. Let me disengage you from it with this bit of humor. And I think that's it. The accent on it was just so good. The timing of it was so funny. The amount of vomit that is that is hitting him is so funny. It's one of the many laughs, but it's one that I truly loved.
And the one moment you forgot to mention is right, like they stop the killer, and right before that, the blood sprays on her. She goes, "Oh, you got it in my mouth." Oh, and then she
that's
vomits
right. Yeah,
all
you got it in my mouth.
And then she vomits all over. And it's again, it is what you said. It's very disengaging. Like you're in this serious moment. You stop the killer. The killer's been foiled, and then she just vomits all over it. And it's hilarious. So My actual answer, and again, I don't even know if it's meant to be the funniest moment in the movie, but my actual answer is the unmasking, because that just absolutely cracked me up when
Yeah,
she's
it's
like, "Who the
very
fuck
funny.
are you?" But we already talked about that, so I'll mention another. But that scene was hilarious when he's like, "Ha ha," and she's like, "Who the fuck are you?" I died. I was like, that was so brilliant. But the other one that got me was at one point, Allie invites Jay back to her house, or she's trying to get back in her house. She forgets her key, and he decides to be the chivalrous guy, and he breaks through the window. But like being the jackass guy he is, he actually gets glass embedded into his hand.
That's a great visual gag too.
It's because he's like, no, let me handle this, and he takes out a handkerchief, wraps it around his hand, and busts him. He's like, I got it, and he's like, oh shit, I got glass in my hand. So she takes him up to her apartment to like help him wash out his hand. But of course, she lives by herself. She doesn't have a boyfriend, and her house is just an absolute wreck. There's pizza boxes all over the place, clothes everywhere. She's like, have a seat. And he looks at the couch and it's just covered. He's like, where the fuck do I sit? And so she gets the first aid kit. He had gone and sat in her bedroom because it was literally the only open seat in the apartment. And she's like, oh shit, he's in my bedroom. She goes to the bedroom and they start talking. And out of the corner of her eye, you see she has a dildo sitting on her nightstand. It's not hidden. It's not in a drawer. It's literally just like sitting on top of her nightstand. And she spots it out of the corner of her eye, and we all spot it too. And he's got his back turned to it. And she starts talking, and she kind of inches her way over to like hide the dildo. But then they're also kind of arguing at this point because he's kind of pissing her off, which is kind of his lot in life coming into this movie. He just keeps bothering her. And she grabs the dildo, she hides behind her back, and she's just like, yeah, blah, blah, they're arguing. And so she goes to the closet where she's inevitably going to try to like chuck it in and throw it so he doesn't see it. And when she opens the closet door, there's the hard ice killer. She screams and she chucks the dildo at the hard ice killer. It's just a great visual gag, and it's a pink dildo, which makes it really stand out. But it's just so funny. You see, because at the beginning of that moment, you see Mason Gooding, you see Olivia Holt, and you see kind of like this blurry object in the back, and then you realize what it is. And when she spots it, she's like, oh shit, and you just see her like edge her way over there, and they just keep, and when she chucks the dildo at the killer, I died. I thought that whole thing was hilarious.
Yeah. Oh my God. I laughed very hard at that entire dildo sequence. It's like, oh, not only is she going to spot the dildo, it's going to pay off to finding out that the killer's in the house, and then she's going to use it against the killer. And then there's like a shot where the scuffle ensues and the dildo's like vibrating across the floor.
It's great. There's also a great line in this movie that made me about spit out my drink during the movie. So at one point early in the movie, Allie is having lunch with her friend, and her friend is the funny friend, and that's just a core part of any great romantic comedy. And Allie is like trying to like she's obsessively stalking her ex-boyfriend like on his Instagram and stuff. And at one point they talk about Jay, and she shows him the photos of Jay on his Instagram, and her friend goes, oh my God, I just flooded my basement. And I just died. I was like, what a great line. I was like, I just cracked. Right? Actually reminded me of a line from Forgetting Sarah Marshall when Jonah Hill's character is watching the rock star on stage, and he goes, I just went from 6 to midnight, which I use that line all the time. You got a heart on it. It cracks me up. But when she goes, I just flooded my basement, I died. I was like, what a great line.
I'll give you one small one, and it was near the beginning, and I fucking loved it. So the way that they don't meet on the job. They meet in a coffee shop before the job. And the barista goes, oh, latte, blah, 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 like this very, very, very specific latte order that's obnoxiously detailed. She goes to grab it, and her hand meets another hand. Well, it's Jay's hand. And he's like, I'm pretty sure that's my drink. And she's like, no, that's my order. And then the barista immediately is like, da da da. And the exact same order comes out. They order the exact kind of coffee. So it's like, oh, I guess we're coffee mates. Ha, ha, ha. And that's their way. That's his way in. And they're laughing and they're talking. And the barista's like, hey, can you move? I have other customers here. I just love that the barista's like, hey, fuck off. Like we're trying, like, don't have your romantic comedy in front of my barista table. I'm trying to serve coffee here.
He's like, can you get the fuck out of the way? I got caught.
That's such a Josh Rubin thing where it's just like like he's constantly subverting the scene. That was such a little romantic, perfect little scene. Like, oh my God, we have the same coffee order, of course. Like, how do I fuck that up? Like, how do I screw with the audience with that one? It's like the barista is telling them to fuck off.
Yeah, it was great because they're having this very sweet, like they caught eyes and they're like staring, almost staring longingly at each other. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, we both have this really complicated, kind of annoying coffee order. And the barista's like, yeah, great. Get the fuck out of the way.
I love it. I just love shit like that. And it's all over this movie. I'm not going to tell you every joke in this movie. I'm just here to tell you that it's all over this movie where it's like your comedy subversion it's just through the roof in this thing. I love it.
Yeah, it's like I said, we don't want to quote the entire movie, but you could. It's that funny.
I certainly could. I can't wait to watch this movie again for all the comedy.
Patrick, next category, best kill. Now, this is a slasher, so they do have some fun and creative kills. So did you have a favorite kill in Hard Eyes?
Boy, I thought it was going to be the one that gets given away in the Red Band trailer. There's a great kill in the Red Band trailer, and up to that point in the movie, I was like, wow, I think this is the biggest kill, and they kind of gave it away. There's a much better, badder kill near the end, and that is Jordana Brewster, Officer Shaw, getting killed in the end, which is she has to go toe to toe with Allie, and Allie manages to run her. She like stabs her in the neck with her little metal straw, and then she's still fighting like hell. So she's like, "Fuck! How do I kill this bitch?" And she finally grabs her and runs her into this Saint Valentine's Day statue that has a sword on it, and it hits her like kind of right around the collarbone where the collarbone and the neck meet, and very slowly and painstakingly, this statue beheads Jordana Brewster in fucking brutal fashion. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's the fucking best kill in the movie. I did not see that shit coming. It was so hardcore. Like they just take time to show like the striations and and all the sinews separating from the neck, like right out of the thing, like and her head just rips off and falls into her own lap. And I was like, God damn.
That was the best part too, because she gets decapitated. The head balances on the sword for about 3 seconds, and it just kind of like topples over and falls in her lap. It's perfect. It is brutal, and also the real Saint Valentine was beheaded, which is kind of like the joke of that is like the real Saint Valentine was beheaded, and that's how the killer gets killed in this movie. Is it gets beheaded? Okay, let me be clear. That is the best kill. But I don't want to just give credit to that one kill because there were some other great kills. I think I know it's technically 2 kills, but my favorite sequence of kills, because this couple was so annoying, I was like, God, I can't wait to get butchered. The opening scene of the movie is this unbelievably annoying couple setting up their proposal scene. And you see it, and it almost feels like a Hallmark movie. Like they got like they're in the middle of a field and they've got like they're dressed up and they got hearts and flowers and it's like
the sun is setting.
Is this a commercial? Like what is this? And the guy gets down on his knee and he proposes and then the girl's just like, and you can tell like she's almost directing him. Like
totally directing him. She planned this whole thing for him to surprise her. It had to go exactly her way.
And then the best part is he gets a call on his phone. It's the photographer he has planted to do this whole thing, and he missed the actual proposal, so they have to do it again. But like this is Bridezilla, 100%. This woman is Bridezilla, and the Hard Eyes killer takes out the guy, and then eventually takes out the girl, puts her in a press, and she gets her entire face squashed and explodes on the screen, which is the other probably most brutal kill in this movie. But that whole opening sequence of the guy, the ultra annoying couple getting offed was so great, such a great payoff, because like watching that scene, I was like, is this a commercial? Is this a Hallmark? This is these people. I want to stab these people. Like this is the most annoying couple in history. And there's a great moment too where after he shoots the boyfriend through the leg with an arrow, so he can't really walk. And then he obviously kills the boyfriend, and the girl is screaming at him. She's like, "I'm the bride you don't want to mess with." And I'm just like, "Oh, please kill her. Please kill her."
I can't wait. And she gets such a terrible death.
Yeah, she gets stuck in like a compactor, and they compact it, and her head explodes. And yeah, it's the head exploding is brutal and it's great and it's a cool scene and it's a cool little sequence, but just killing that annoying couple was like, thank you. Like that's
Every slasher needs somebody that you want to see slashed. And they go, let's just put that right out front. How do we do that? Let's make the world's most annoying romantic couple. And I was like, oh, perfect. And they even double down on it by making sure that he cusses out the photographer, like he talks shit to the photographer. So you're like, oh yeah, I for sure don't like these people. I know I don't like her, and now I for sure don't like the guy. Perfect. Like I won't be sad if they get out of this movie, and that's exactly what they got, exactly what they deserved.
I did feel bad for my guy Devin Sawa. He got a giant machete right up the nuts, which was a brutal death for poor
Oh man,
poor Hobbs.
Sorry, Devin.
Poor Detective Hobbs.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying he got a machete right up the old ball sack.
I loved it in the interrogation scene where he's getting all hot and heated, and he kind of plays like a doofus, like kind of a musclehead detective, and he plays it very well. Devin's just a fantastic actor, and Jordana Brewster comes in, she's like, "I got this. Go ahead and step out." And he steps out, and then he just stands mean mugging behind the frosted glass. It was just a great visual gag. Like
Yeah.
I love so much how Josh Rubin was able to put together just even the blocking is funny in this movie.
It reminded me, I know this is a weird reminder, but it kind of reminded me of watching the first season of True Detective when you realize that, like, Matthew McConaughey's character, Rust, he's like the real detective. Like, he's the one who's truly figuring things out. And you kind of got the meathead jocular guy, Woody Harrelson. He's just like, it's kind of like that, where he's just like, he's the guy who will slam the suspect against the wall, trying to get him to tell. And Matthew McConaughey's the one who'll get in his head to, like, figure it out.
Yeah.
That's kind of that. Like, Devin Sawa's the guy who's just, like, trying to intimidate him and trying to get him to give up the information by, like, scaring him. And then, yeah, he steps out of the room and he's still staring through the glass like, It's great. It's great. Patrick, next category. Can we survive this horror film? Now, listen, this is a slasher, so of course, this is a perfect setup for Can We Survive This Horror Film? And of course, just so everyone knows, this is the category where we inject ourselves into whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, could we survive this horror film? Now, in our cases, we are both couples, not with each other, although hetero life mates perhaps. But you have a wife and I've had a girlfriend for over a decade, so we have our significant others. Could you survive Hard Eyes?
Good question. I will say this, Damon. I'm definitely a target. But Hard Eyes would really have to know what's going on in this house, not to get into too many details, as my wife would slam me over the head. But most of the romance is happening here in this house, because when we're out in the world, my wife and I are rather we're rather toothy, I should say, because we also have like a couple of kids that we're trying to like keep going, so it doesn't look romantic out there in real life. Out there in real life, we look like any other couple going, I don't know where his cup is, I don't know where the thing is, do you know? I'm not, what am I, the master of cups? Like, it's shit like that. So I think I want to say I'm safe in public with the Hard Eyes killer.
This is going to sound really terrible, and if anyone listens to the show right now, they're going to be like, man, what happened? and I think you would agree with me on this, Patrick. You know, you've been in a relationship for many years, longer than I have. I've been in a relationship for 12 years, going on 13, and you've been in a relationship longer than I have. When you're first getting together, it is all about the romance. You go out of your way. You even celebrate. I hate Valentine's Day, by the way. I think it's one of the dumbest holidays. But you go out of your way to just spread the romance early on. It's not just because that's just the nature of relationships. But as you get into routines, those things just kind of fade away. Now, you can still be romantic, and I still try to do romantic things for my girlfriend, and we still do that occasionally, but it's no longer built around like holidays or a certain day. Like, I'll do something when I make her breakfast or something like that. But back in the day, I made her like sweet little videos, and you bring the flowers home and things like just overtly romantic things. Now it's like the little things that matter. So when I say that I think I'd survive, it's because when me and my girlfriend, like back in the day, we would go out a lot, and like we'd have like these really nice dinners on Valentine's Day, or right around Valentine's Day, things like that. Now we're kind of like, yeah, we don't really enjoy people. So why do we want to be in public? So like, if you see me and my girlfriend in public, it's generally when we're out like at IKEA, or something like that, and that's fun for us, which again, we're old fuddies. Or we're like going to the movies, and we go to the movies a lot together, and that's like our fun night out is like going to the movies, or like we might go, like there's a place in Columbus called Dirty Frank's. It's a hot dog place, great place, and we'll go to eat there. We're not going to the fancy restaurants and spending like $400 on a dinner or anything like that. And like I said, you might catch us in the record store together, something like that. So yeah, I guess the long and short of what I'm getting at is you're not going to catch me either, because chances are you're not going to see us walking out of the super expensive Valentine's Day restaurant holding hands, and we're not real big into public shows of affection either. So yeah, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think both of us are pretty safe overall.
Any women that are listening to the show right now, like, Jesus, I feel for your wife and girlfriend. God damn.
Listen, all I'm saying, everybody, is that when the door closes in this front house, the cat is on the prowl, is all I'm saying. Outside the house, you got to be a little more demure and mindful. But, inside, I'm all tiger, baby.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we like I said, the magic happens behind closed doors around here. So.
Yes, of course. Yeah, very discreet.
Patrick, next category: remake, sequel, or leave it alone. This is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain it anyways. This is where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they just leave it alone? I feel like I know where we're going to go with this category.
I feel like it should be obvious, Damon, because any good slasher deserves a sequel. They just do. This is not a good slasher. This is a great slasher. This slasher deserves a sequel. Now you go, well, wait, what's your way in? Because it was just a random occurrence. Well, there's such a thing as copycat killers, and there is such a thing as the randomness still being a thing. You could also have a sequel where it's not random, where it's targeted. It's targeted towards a certain person. Allie and Jay could come back if you wanted to. I mean, obviously by the end of this movie, they're very much in love, as is the way in any good romantic comedy. So they could be the target of the sequel, and they did a great job. So it's not like I wouldn't mind seeing them come back. The dynamic would be different, but Valentine's Day would still very much be a target for them. So I think you go copycat killer, and you keep going, and you keep that spirit of randomness. Be like, because and Josh Rubin does something very wise and very smart in this movie, is that you show up 1 year after the events of the first HEK killing, and people are already dressed like the HEK killer. And we've talked about that numerous times on this podcast. Like, people like fetishize killers. And indeed, and it happens in Scream, it's happened in Friday the 13th, and even Freddy Krueger, where people like dress up like the killer, like they do for fun. So there's no reason why there wouldn't be someone that takes on the hard eyes persona and goes after people on Valentine's Day. I mean, it's an open and shut case, Damon. This is a sequel.
100%. It's a slasher. You got to give us a sequel. And I think, you could do it one of two ways. You could do it just with a whole new story, whole new copycat killer, as you said. And you could, again, you could lace in a little bit more plot if you want to, as long as you don't overcomplicate it. But you could do that. Or I have no problem if you get a good script and you can bring back Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding and make it charming. I'm all for it. I mentioned earlier, there is a post-credit scene. So if you do go see this, there is a post-credit scene where you see Allie and Jay have gotten together. They've been together for a year. And at the end of the movie, Jay hands her a little box. You're like, oh, he's proposing, and it's actually a key to his apartment. And then she actually proposes to him. It's a really funny moment. But then she gets a phone call, and it's the distorted voice of the killer, which we do have a moment where we actually hear the voice of the killer, and it's like a distorted voice where he's like, roses are red, violets are black, and in the movie, in the post credit scenes, like, roses are red, violets are blue. I'm gonna kill him and you too, or something like that. And she's like, "Are we getting like a post credit scene with like the killer?" And it's actually her friend who's shooting the proposal, much like the opening scene of the movie. Her friend is taking photos of the proposal. It's really funny and great cutaway scene. But you could easily take that and have that, run into the next movie where now they actually are a couple. And they actually are together. There's no more like, we're not actually a couple. They say that like 20 times this movie. We're not actually together, because they weren't. But you could run it with them, and I think it'd be a lot of fun if you get a good script, or if you just want to start all over again and just say, here we are, the Hard Eyes Killer in Austin, or we're the Hard Eyes Killer in Chicago, or again, there's a million. If you make it funny and you make it, compelling characters and you don't overcomplicate it, I'm all for it. So give us a sequel.
I'm way into a sequel.
Yeah. Last category, Patrick, is it scary? So at the end of the day, this is a different kind of slasher. And I know you and I have talked about this before because, again, you're a diehard Friday the 13th guy. I'm a diehard Nightmare on Elm Street guy. But Hard Eyes, is it scary?
I should have probably said, is it slashy? And the answer is hell fucking yeah, it's slashy. It's 100% a great slasher movie. It gives you what you want. You want a body count, you want creative kills, you get all of those things. You want an interesting looking villain, you get that too. And on top of that, you just get a funny and fun movie. So this is a full 360, fully complete movie. Is it making me shiver me timbers? There's a couple of decent jump scares every now and then. I'm certainly nothing that came even close to getting me, but it was like, the structure of this movie is everything you're looking for. It's just not going to keep you up at night. It's not Freddy and Jason where it's meant to terrify you. It's meant to thrill you and chill you in the funnest ways possible, and it totally succeeds.
Yeah, in your revised version of this, is it slashy? Yes, it is. This is the quintessential slasher film. Again, I think we got one with Thanksgiving. I think they did a really good job of just making that a fun, easy to follow. And there again, even that one's a little bit more of a complicated plot, but it's not really complicated. It's just there's a motive for the killer, really. This one, there's a fetish for the killer. Same kind of thing though, not overcomplicated, fun kills, give us some compelling, good, fun characters to watch, and let us see some cool kills. And this one has the added bonus of being absolutely hilarious. So yeah, this is a quintessential slasher movie. I said it to you before we recorded the show. I said if they released this in 1987, people would be having posters on their walls. They'd be releasing like the new, like updated 4K version right now. Like this would be one of those movies that would just be a beloved slasher of that era. But now it actually came out in 2025. Fantastic job, Josh Rubin. Fantastic job, Christopher Landon. The entire team behind this. And again, Mason Gooding, Olivia Holt. This was a knockout. This was so much fun. And I guess my last point, and I know you agree, is like it doesn't need to be more than what it is. This is a fun, funny slasher.
And a bit of a romance month, isn't it, Damon? We just did Companion, which was another romantic movie, and we rounded out with Hard Eyes, and both of these movies are great. I mean, the beginning of this year is starting very strong. I'm curious to see what the rest of the year is looking like because Companion and Hard Eyes back to back are two very good movies.
You know what I realized? We said this last year. We had such a really incredibly strong year for horror in 2024, and you and I said that might be one of the best years for horror ever. I think coming out of the pandemic, my day job is covering the UFC, and I want to correlate. I'm going to compare these two. When the UFC was during the pandemic and everything was shut down, the UFC was like the first sport to come back. They were like, we're going to do shows. We're going to do it safe. We're going to do it, without crowds, but we're going to put on shows. We're going to keep going. Give people something to watch. Give some people entertain themselves. And ever since the pandemic, the UFC has been doing more business than anybody. Like they are just I mean, they're printing money at the box office. They're selling out arenas. They are just on top of the world. Horror, we talked about coming out of the pandemic, was one of the only genres that got people to go back to theaters because people were like, this is something I'll pay my $12, $15, $20 to go see a movie, and it's fun. And we've talked about the success of that time. The pandemic changed everything. Better or worse, it changed everything. And horror has continued to be one of the genres that actually got people to go to the theater. Now, when you say, well, hold on, these movies are making $50, $60, $70 million, it doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're working on like a $4 million budget, it's a huge amount of money. No, they're not making $1 billion like Deadpool, but they're still making money, and that's why studios and executives are going back to this formula and saying, we want more horror. And we said it with Companion. January, we ended up basically having like 3 or 4 new movies. And I think it was like 2 years ago, we had like maybe one new movie in January and February. The entire 2 months, we had like one new movie to review. We've been going back to back to back, and I think it's going to be like, because I've looked at the calendar, it's pretty packed. Like, it's pretty packed this year because I think horror is still in that, like, renaissance where they're like, hey, people are willing to go see this in the theater. They don't cost Marvel money, but we still make like 10 or 12 times our budgets. Let's keep at this. And you know what? Sign me the fuck up.
And for the people that are listening to this right now that are faithful listeners when we release, you got Thanksgiving weekend coming up right now. This is a perfect Thanksgiving.
Or you mean Valentine's Day?
I mean Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day. That's how much I hate Thanksgiving too. That's where my mind was at. But it's a Valentine's Day movie. So you're listening to this on Wednesday or Thursday. Friday's Valentine's Day. Go with your significant other and go watch a romantic comedy slasher that will not disappoint. This is meant for butts in seats. Comedies are meant to be laughed together in a crowd. Go enjoy yourself. Have a blast seeing Hard Eyes. I promise you're going to have a good time.
100%. All right, Patrick, that's our episode for this week. Of course, we want to say a big thank you, as always, to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, over on our website, rewindofTheLivingDead.com. You can find all of our podcasts as well as news, stories, other reviews of movies we don't have time to get on the podcast, so go check out the website as well. And also check out our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, as I always say, and I'm sorry I keep harping on this. Even if you don't watch us on YouTube, if you just like and subscribe, it does make a huge difference in the algorithm search results. We're still desperately trying to build our YouTube channel. We were a late arriver to that, so we're still trying to build that. But also, if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate us, leave comments. That does make a huge difference in terms of like when people are searching for just like horror podcast, what pops up. So if you have time to give us a review or you like our show, we would really appreciate that as well. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, send us emails. We like hearing from you guys. rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Or you can find us on all of our social media channels. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter/X, Facebook, or Instagram. We tend to get the most interaction on Instagram, but we'd love to hear from you guys. However you can reach out to us. Again, just search Rewind of the Living Dead on all of your favorite social media platforms, and you will find us over there. And we are now, do we want to, no, are we going to make an announcement tonight, or are we going to wait on that?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? Let's wait on it or make a little special video for it. Yeah, because, yeah.
All right. So next, stay tuned. Special announcement coming soon. What we got coming up very soon, because we do have another new movie coming up later this month. The Monkey is coming out in a couple weeks, so we will be reviewing that. But we do have a special announcement, so stay tuned for that. So, another reason to follow us on social media. And you can also follow us you can also send us messages and follow us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. We appreciate it as always. We'll see you next week for another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.